My name's Joanna. I'm an historian, and I am so excited to talk to you about books. Welcome to my new Booktube channel. So, when I thought about starting a Booktube channel, what I looked forward to the most was being able to share my intense love of history and my deep enjoyment of the sort of work that historians are doing today. When people think about history classes, they tend to remember being stuck in grade 9 social studies and being reminded about the importance of names and dates and dead prime ministers and presidents. A lot of people complain that history is all about the ways people kill each other. And I understand where that comes from because a lot of times in schools, curriculums are set around things that are frankly easy to test. If I ask my students what happened in 1608, they automatically know the answer to that question is the founding of Quebec. You might not have known that. I am a Canadian historian. But to me, when I think about what history is, I don't think about, well, this is the date they founded Quebec. I think about the blind girls that I wrote about in my dissertation that focuses on like the letters that they wrote to each other and the autobiographies that blind people wrote in the 19th century. And the way education was formed around making sure they could be good maidenly aunts in the home. That's what I think of when I think about history, and it tends not to be what other people do. I think the way that we teach history in high school is really damaging because when we get out of high school, a lot of times people become very fascinated by history. They love historical costuming. They love historical novels. They love podcasts about history. Some of the most popular podcasts in the world are about history. But academia seems to have this space between what it's wanting to do and what we communicate to people outside of the ivory tower. And I don't mean that to be like, oh, and of course, academic history is just so much better than any other history that's being done. I don't think that. Most historians I know don't think that. But we have such a hard time breaking out of what we do in our classrooms into what we would like to do outside of them. On some level, I'm really envious of public historians who work in museums, who do walking tours, who create podcasts and book videos, because they get to talk to the public about what it is they do. And I know from my own experience that when we do that, people listen. People like what we do with our time. And so what I want to do with a Booktube channel is two things. The first one is to be able to talk about history books that I think deserve a wider audience. I'm not under the impression that every book I want to tell you about, you will then decide, oh, I must pick up that book immediately and read every word of it. But I would like you to be aware of the types of research that is going on to get over this weird belief on the internet that the entire historical profession does not believe that gay people existed in the past. If I hear one more, oh, they were just roommates, I'm going to lose my mind. There is so much queer history being done every day. So, what I want to do with this channel is talk to you about books. I want to talk to you about the way history is being done. Like right now, I am reading The Possession of Barbe Hallay, which is a book about beliefs around witchcraft in 17th century New France. I want to talk to you about The Return of Martin Guerre, which is a book about a law case in France about a family that believed that Martin Guerre, who had disappeared, had returned. And then it turned out that wasn't Martin Guerre. That was some other man pretending to be him. And what we know about that all comes from law cases. I also want to talk to you about this book about Calling the Spirits, A History of Seances, that is written by a non-historian, but uses so much of the history that we know in order to tell a story about the past that is written with a different tone than the way academic histories are. I am so excited to explain about ugly laws and about the idea about how in the past, a lot of our attitudes towards disability now in 2024 are still driven by attitudes about disability from the 19th century. Ugly laws, or what are more accurately called unsightly beggar ordinances, were a thing in both the United States and the United Kingdom. How does that still affect us? These are the things I want to talk about, and I'm finding, because academia is not the best place right now, that it's harder and harder for me to engender this passion in my students. It's not that my students do not care about history. It's that there is so much more going on in their lives that a lot of times what they end up focusing on is what they need, which is, I need to get a good grade, I need to have this class demonstrate to me what it will do for me when I graduate. And I understand that. I keep that in mind. So for all that I'm reading about witchcraft in 17th century for the lecture that I will be giving literally the day I post this video, I know that I could get more people really interested in that time in New France by making a video about it. And that's not a dig at my students. They delight me. It's more a concern about how academia now is really focused on what do you need to get out of it, and not what can you benefit from being here. So this is my new booktuber tag, and I'm hoping that my passion and my genuine belief that history is fascinating and interesting, that there is so much to teach and learn and engage with, conveys to the audience, that would be you, that this is worth doing, that this is worth knowing, that this is worth engaging with. This is my hope. So I'm doing the new booktubers tag, and it's got some questions, and I thought I would answer them. So the first question is, why did you start this channel? And I have been fantasizing about starting a booktube channel for a long time. I've had friends who have been like, oh, Joanna, you would be really good at that. You are so good at conveying your enthusiasm whenever you talk about anything. Students talk about how when I get into a topic I'm really into, my whole face lights up. And I've missed that. I am so excited to be able to share these things with a wider audience. And I hope you are too. And it's not that I think that somehow I have more to offer just because I have a PhD, but I do think I have different things to offer because of my PhD. I had to read 300 books on history in a year, and it's amazing how much that stuff just sticks in your head. It also means that I understand a lot of what the difference is between an engagingly written book and a book that is really, really good in terms of its academic content, but not necessarily something I would recommend somebody read just because they were interested in that topic. I feel like I've answered a bunch of these questions already. The second question is, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to Booktube? One of the things I learned when I was doing what is called coursework and when I was preparing for what are called comprehensive exams here is how to read books for extracting the information you need as quickly as possible. It is unfortunately the way a lot of academics read books. At some point, you stop reading every word. I miss reading every word. I miss enjoying the books that I was reading. And so I think that I have all these books in my background. There are ones I still think about all the time. They're ones that I will never read again. And I like the idea of being able to share the ones that I think really would make a difference in people's understanding of the past. And the next question is, what are you most excited about? And I'm going to tell you the truth here. I've been teaching online for a while, so I've gotten really used to talking to a camera. So I'm gonna be really intimate with you here. Hey, I have been extremely depressed. I have been struggling a lot with my mental health, and it means I stopped enjoying my life. I stopped enjoying anything. I miss liking teaching. I miss reading. I miss feeling like all of this had a point. I really miss that. The type of work that I do is called contract faculty work. What this means is I teach for relatively low wages at 3 different institutions. I commute more hours a week than most people would work in a part-time job. I'm embarrassed to tell you how much I commute in a week. I miss enjoying teaching. And a lot of what I enjoyed about teaching before my life became endless commutes on buses and trains and subways was interacting with students and getting to know them and their interests. I've taught a history of human rights before, where I learned so much from my students because they wanted to cover certain things. I have taught a history of science class, which completely sparked my fascination in the history of science. The thing I'm most excited to talk to you about is about space archaeology. I'm so excited to tell you about the space archaeology books I've read. I've only read 2 of them so far, but I have a 3rd one on my shelf. I'm gonna read that one too, and then I'm gonna get to tell you about it. I miss feeling good about what I did with my time. My students are wonderful. My Monday class, which I promise you I commute the farthest from, and I do not want to tell you how long the commute is, but I spend more time on Monday commuting than I do teaching. Those students are great. They are worth that long commute. I love learning with them, but I'm tired. And I want to find another way of engaging with the things I like about teaching, about sharing this stuff, without having to ride a train to a bus to a subway. I'm tired. So I'm hoping that this channel will be another way for me to rekindle the love and the passion for teaching, for reading, for learning, for history that I remember having. This got very emotional. I also own way too many books. I have seen so many Booktube channels and people will have huge bookshelves behind them, and I spent a lot of time actually not wanting to start this channel because I wasn't sure where I should record, because do I look like I don't own any books? Oh my god. I want to defend myself. But the terrible truth is, I own these books. I haven't read these books. I have become a book collector and not a book reader. And I picked up every one of these books with the intention of reading them. I didn't pick them up because I just needed something to put on my shelves. I wanted to read them. But the thing that depression takes away from you is your ability to concentrate. It takes away your ability to enjoy things. This book that I keep on referencing, The Possession of Barb Halley, I've read it so quickly. It's really good. It immediately reminded me why I liked this. So the next question is, why do you love reading? And I'm like, because it's where all the knowledge is stored. That's why. I love it. It's so great. Like, I think the problem with the way that academic history is siloed off so much is that people end up not knowing a lot of really cool things that historians just know, right? Like, part of what I tried to do this summer to rekindle my love of reading, it sadly did not work, was to start reading more around the history of citizen scientists in the biological fields, right? And so I read some articles and some books about the way that our understanding of biology as a field of science is shaped a lot by amateur biologists doing the sort of work that you could be doing right now, but that we know about the past because of. And one of the sources for this in terms of like what sort of plants were growing in Canada are quilts. And I want to share that exciting knowledge about how historians look at quilts from the 18th and 19th century to understand the history of biology. Like, isn't that fascinating? Don't you want to know more about that? I want to know more about that. So this is the sort of thing that I think it's just so unfortunate that we, as a profession, struggle so much to do the public history portion of it. And again, I want to be clear. I have colleagues who are public historians. That's what they do. I have colleagues who are public science communicators who talk about this history. I just feel there's like a divide, and I want to be part of that public history facing event. I want to be part of that group that shares the history that we know. It's disappointing to me how much people don't realize we know about the past, the cool things people don't think we do. Quilts that are part of our history of biology. It's amazing. I can't wait to tell you about it. So the next one is, what book or series got you into reading? And I'm actually going to skip that one because I don't know how to answer it. What book or series got me into reading? I don't know. I have all these yellow books behind me are Nancy Drew books. I'm reading a lot of those right now because that's about where my brain is in terms of what content I can handle. And some days I'm finding Nancy Drew a bit harder because, again, very depressed. I was interested in the history of science before I taught that class. One of my fields, as we call them in PhD school, is history of science, medicine, and the environment. And I have a lot of books just kicking around about that topic, the history of science, the history of medicine. I'm a disability-focused historian. The history of the environment is really fascinating. And that is what really, like, having to read 100 books in that field, having to teach that course really made me realize how much there is there and how fascinating it can be to talk about history and to see the way that science changes over time and our ideas of science change over time. That book over there, the white one, that is called Ways of Knowing. It is a foundational text in the history of science. in terms of thinking about the ways people have changed. How do we know about the past? And how do we understand the universe in our present tense? And the ways that doing science have changed over time. I didn't think that would be a fascinating topic, but it turns out it is a fascinating topic. Who knew? I mean, obviously somebody did, because John Pickstone wrote that book. But who knew? I did not. What questions would you ask your favorite booktubers? Some of my favorite booktubers are the nonfiction booktubers. When I think about nonfiction booktubers, I think about Nonfiction November, with a book Olive, who hosts Nonfiction November. I think about other booktubers that focus on nonfiction. I know that most booktubers read fiction, and more power to you. I also read fiction, not just Nancy Drew, although I do read a lot of Golden Age detective novels. I like them. They're fun. I'm scared. I'm scared that this won't be something that people engage with. And I know everyone says, just do the booktube, just do it. And I watch a lot of very small creators, and they seem to be having a really good time. But I wonder a lot about, does this feel exhausting when it feels like you're talking to yourself? I taught online during the height of the pandemic. For me, that meant making a lot of recordings just like this, except with a script and a PowerPoint slide. And I really got used to either talking to myself because it was a recording, or talking on Zoom to a bunch of little black squares on the Zoom page. And so you get used to feeling like you're only talking to yourself. I'm used to that. I can do that. But I admit that I want to feel like I'm talking to people. I want to feel like somebody's out there engaging with this. And I wonder what it's like when you focus on nonfiction, or you focus on philosophy, or you focus on, well, history, if you end up feeling alone. What challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? Getting over the embarrassment. No, seriously, right? Like, you're talking to yourself, you're talking about books. I don't have a great set. I don't have great lighting. I'm putting music on underneath this because my microphone has a slight buzz to it, and I'm hoping that will hide it. I want to be like those booktubers I see that have a beautiful set and have a great camera and have amazing content, and their audio is perfect and everything is edited well, and their thumbnails are engaging and their titles are perfect. And I know that you have to start someplace. I know that there isn't an option where you start at the top. But I'm really kind of intimidated by the whole thing. When did you start reading? Okay. All right. I don't know. I don't remember. My father tells me the story of my mother teaching me to read using the little alphabet letters on the fridge. The first book I remember reading is There's a Monster at the End of This Book by Grover. And I would get super upset reading that book because Grover is telling you not to do the next page, but you can't not do the next page. And I would be like, we're upsetting Grover. I don't know if I ever said that as a child, but I really remember that feeling. So yes, I think about the monster at the end of this book a lot. And I think about how my mom, who wanted to be a teacher, but for reasons that I'm still not clear on, chose not to be, taught me to read, and how I get to teach. I get to share my knowledge with students. I get to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Wednesdays to commute into my other early morning class so I can teach these students about Asclepius and about Spinoza and about whatever else I teach in that class. It's an 8:30 class. Please be happy that I'm awake for it. I get to do that. I mean, I don't enjoy the waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning part, but I wouldn't have to if I didn't have dogs. I love my dogs. Their names are Footnote and Index. They are at daycare today, or Index would at some point show up right here to complain that I'm paying attention to the computer and not to her. If I get 5 likes on this video, I'll make sure Index is in the next one. Where do you read? Here. Got my couch behind me. I read on the bus and the train and the subway. I read in bed. I listen to audiobooks on my walks. This is all when I'm feeling like a person who's capable of reading. For a while in the summer, I would take my book up to this churchyard that's not too far from here, and I would sit under the trees by their community garden and read an article about the history of science. That's where I read the book that has the article about quilts. And I could hear the birds. It's too cold to do that now, but summer will come again. I also read a lot at my local coffee shop. I'm reading there less often because coffee costs money. I miss it. I get a lot of my books from the bookstore that's right next to my local coffee shop, where they are incredibly kind to me and let me buy all the Nancy Drew books that I want. Sadly, I'm missing book 12, and they don't have book 12 because somebody else bought it before I did. And I can get book 12, don't get me wrong. It's just I want to get it from my local bookstore. Charles! Don't worry, Charles will never see this. What kind of books do you like to read? I feel I've answered what kind of books would I like to read quite a lot throughout this. Like I say, I like mysteries when I'm reading for fun. I like history of science. I am so excited at the idea of again enjoying reading. I really enjoy Canadian history. That's why I'm a Canadian historian. And I know a lot of people, especially Canadians, think Canadian history is boring. Oh, what happened? What did y'all do? Right? I have this dream of starting a podcast that I call in my head Not Hockey Night in Canada. That's just a history of riots in Canada. We've rioted about a lot of things. My favorite is the Caraquet Riots, about whether or not, religion should be taught in schools. And if so, what type of religion should be taught in schools? And I shouldn't say favorite because 2 people were shot and died. But it's a thing that I didn't know before I had to study in my Canadian history class in PhD school. And the things that we kind of take for granted in terms of what actually happened to shape Canada. Why is my mother still angry about Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 2024? Why is she still upset about the flag? This is Canadian history, and a lot of my students don't know it. I'm teaching a class on human rights right now, and I have to explain where the charter came from. 1982, repatriation, the fight to get disability included as a protected class in section 15 of the charter, the development of the term First Nations coming out of the discussions around repatriating the Constitution. It's so interesting. And I love it. I have books on my bookshelf about the history of Saskatchewan. My father was born in Saskatchewan. I should know more about it. I have a book over here, just off screen. I'm like, I don't feel like somebody who has enough books. And then I've got piles of books here. I've got a pile of books here. I got a pile of books here. I've got this bookshelf here. I have enough books. This book over here is called Every Living Thing. And it's about the type of history of trying to identify all of the plants and animals and organisms in the world. It's underneath the hidden staircase, which is a second Nancy Drew book. Every Living Thing. The Great and Deadly Race to Know All Life. It's so long. I can't wait to find out about platypus. I can't wait to learn about goldfish for the queen. I don't know this history and I want to. Also, Hidden Staircase. Not the best Nancy Drew book I've read this week, but you know, it was good. I guess the point, for me at least, is people get excited about history when you take it out of the high school classroom. They just do. They do want to know the history of platypuses. They do want to see how Frankenstein reflects concerns about advancement in science and technology. They do want to hear about blind girls and their autobiographies in the 19th century. They do want to know about the history of Nancy Drew and how the books were all rewritten in the 1950s and why. Everything I know about people tells me that history is fascinating to them. What's scary is this book and its 350 pages of what people think will be a dense academic text. What's scary is, what do I need to know to understand this argument about how witchcraft was perceived in New France and how that is very different from how witchcraft was perceived in Salem? The possession of Barb Halley is a regular story on ghost tours in Quebec, but it's not in the public consciousness the way the Salem witchcraft trials are. No one's making a remake of Hocus Pocus with the Witch of Quebec. It's not Barb Halley, by the way. She's not the witch. I want to share this with you. I want this to be something we can talk about together. And I hope you'll join me. I hope it's fun. I'm posting this on Monday, which is the day that I have my favorite class that I teach this term, but also the day where literally my commute is more hours than you think it is. I'm too embarrassed about how long that commute is to tell you how long that commute is. It's really long. So it would be super nice if you could give me that little boost of dopamine of doing the whole liking and commenting and sharing and subscribing. Thank you for watching this today. Next week, also on a Monday, I'm going to post a discussion about the possession of Barb Halley. The week after that, I want to talk about space archaeology. I hope you'll join me then. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and tell your pets I said hi.